I rise on behalf of the Greens to speak on the Gambling Administration Bill 2019. I thank the government for their briefing, which was held yesterday. I thank them for the scant answers that I have received so far to my questions. I note that in their contribution, the opposition, represented by the Honourable Claire Scriven, made a contribution of some 397 words on this bill. Of course, that stands in absolute glory compared to their 134 words on the regulation bill that is its companion. 397 words the opposition had to say on this bill, a bill which contains neither quality nor quantity, through you, Mr President. And I ask my first question, if the opposition today, who has just gagged the ability of the crossbenchers to engage in this debate, has a lead spokesperson for this debate today to answer the crossbenchers' questions about the agreement, the deal, the backroom brokered deal between the Treasurer and the Shadow Treasurer on this bill that is now embodied in these pieces of government legislation? Or will the opposition continue to hide behind that deal and not face the music in this place? This bill, it is described by the government, aligns and consolidates various administrative matters under the Act across all sectors of the gambling industry, including that of the Commissioner's powers of inquiry and direction, the Commissioner's powers when conducting proceedings. It ensures uniform rights for gambling providers to seek a review of a decision by the Commissioner before the licensing court. It also provides for a streamlined process for the Commissioner to prescribe advertising and responsible gambling, codes of practice and gambling administration guidelines. It extends the expiation fees to all gambling providers for a breach of the code of practice. It also ensures that the appointment of persons as inspectors for the purposes of the Gambling Acts and providing uniform powers of inspection. And it also simplifies and standardises the legislative power for compliance, enforcement and disciplinary action. Simplifies and standardised. Well, when they did the dodgy deal, the backroom deal, that Shadow Treasurer and the Treasurer, they certainly simplified and standardised the processes in this place between the opposition and the government. The bill will also allow persons at risk of harm or at risk of causing harm to a family member because of a gambling addiction or problem to be barred for a period or an indefinite period, including from the premises of a single gambling provider or indeed from the premises of multiple gambling providers. This bill also broadens barring orders and those provisions to allow for a barring order where, whether self-imposed or enforced by the Commissioner or enforced by a third party, to be initiated for any period of time and indefinitely should those circumstances permit. Those provisions, Mr President, are not ones that the crossbench seeks to query today. Much of this bill, indeed, will provide some better measures and clearer measures, but the lack of transparency, the lack of process, the lack of respect to the crossbenchers today indeed reflects a lack of transparency, a lack of process and a lack of respect given to the community sector and those voices in the community that should have been at the table when the Treasurer and the Shadow Treasurer did their deal on note acceptors in exchange for facial recognition, in exchange for no conscience vote on the side of the government, no conscience vote on the side of the opposition, and today almost no debate in this place whatsoever on the merits or otherwise of this bill, and in particular on the merits or otherwise of the changes that were made by the Labor opposition to this bill in the other place. 397 words, and not a word about how the facial recognition technology will be applied. Not a word in the 134 words on the regulation bill. Not a word about whether or not facial recognition technology will be ensured to only apply to those who have barring orders and not used to apply to actually create problem gamblers or indeed fleece willing gamblers from their money more regularly, more quickly and more strategically. We have no safeguards in this bill from the proposition put before us by the Labor opposition, with no consultation with stakeholders, who are those who represent those at risk of gambling harm, no consultation to ensure that this technology will not be used for nefarious purposes rather than protective ones. We do, however, have an agreement between Labor and Liberal that we are going to see note acceptors in this state, which means that people will be able to gamble away their money more quickly, and in those cases of the problem gamblers, with less protection in some situations. This bill will also insert those requirements for facial recognition that I have mentioned. They are the Labor amendments to the government bill in the other place. Indeed, the facial recognition systems will be approved by the Commissioner under the Casino Act 1997 or the Gaming Machines Act 1992. It does also allow some greater scope for the Commissioner to make publicly available information regarding expenditure on gambling activities undertaken under a Gambling Act. It mandates the Commissioner's report to include the total net state wagering revenue of all authorised betting operators and the total net gambling revenue of the holders of all gaming machine licences and the special club licence. I note that we had the briefing on this bill, Mr President, just yesterday. So I did ask some questions and I will now place them onto the record. These were received today at 1:46 p.m, Mr President. It is now 3:45. I, being in question time, have not had a great deal of time to digest the responses to our questions. We did ask in our briefing who was involved in the consultation on this bill. And we were told that there had been a round table. I note at that round table from the government sector, there was the Department of Human Services, the Department of Treasury and Finance, the Licensing Court of South Australia, SAPOL Licensing Enforcement Branch, Lotteries Commission of South Australia, the Office for Recreation and Sport, support services and researchers including the University of Adelaide's SA Centre for Economic Studies, the University of Adelaide School of Psychology, Aboriginal Family Support Service, Anglicare South Australia, Lifeline Mount Gambier, Oars Community Transitions, the Overseas Chinese Students Association, PsychMed Proprietary Limited, Relationships Australia of South Australia, SACOS, the South Australian Council of Social Services, the Statewide Gambling Therapy Services, Uniting Communities, Uniting Country SA, Vietnamese Community in Australia, South Australia, and from the industry, of course, always at the table, the Adelaide Casino, Club One SA Limited, Independent Gaming Corporation, IGC, the Australian Hotels Association, Gaming Care, Clubs SA/Club Safe, Greyhound Racing SA, Harness Racing SA, Responsible Wagering Australia, South Australian Bookmakers League Incorporated, Thoroughbred Racing South Australia, Tabcorp Holdings, Sports SA. That was at the round table. Some of those aforementioned made a submission and some did not make a written submission following that round table. What I am interested to hear from government is how many of those submissions, either in that roundtable that day, either in the informal meeting or following that with the written submission, made a submission on note acceptors and made a submission on facial recognition technology. We will be seeking those answers from government. Certainly in the briefing, the full nature of the deal that has presented itself and wended its way to this upper house of this parliament was not consulted on in that particular roundtable. I note also that we asked the government about the community impact test, and I'll let the Honourable Connie Benares go into further detail on that, but flag with the government that we will be asking further questions with regard to the community impact test as we move into the committee stages of this bill. For while the Greens will be opposing this bill today, we have seen quite starkly that the government and the opposition will be in lockstep on this, and they will be in lockstep to a point where no consideration will be given of other voices other than the Treasurer and the Shadow Treasurer and their deal behind the scenes that was done without the scrutiny of Parliament, without the scrutiny of a committee process, without the scrutiny of proper community consultation on the very measures that were brokered, and that facial recognition technology, whether or not that shall be protected from being used, not to protect gamblers, as the opposition has put it, but indeed to procure gamblers. So again, I also ask the government to give us some guarantees on that front, that this deal that they have done with the Labor opposition will not lead to unforeseen outcomes. This bill is certainly one that we will be going through in committee stage in great detail. I could get up and speak for 5 hours. We could do what has been done in the past in terms of a work cover debate or a return to work debate, which indeed with the return to work debate, when the Weatherill government rammed that one through, the fact that the now Premier, the then Leader of the Opposition, had told everyone to vote Labor made a whole lot more sense, because when it comes to some of these matters of great state importance, Labor and Liberal are often in lockstep, and in lockstep to the point where they tread all over the voices of those in the community who are harmed and the voices of the crossbencher in this place who were duly elected to represent views that are not often heard in this place and were certainly not given appropriate opportunity to be heard, with a rushed process where the opposition and the government have done that backroom deal, have ensured that note acceptors in this state will allow South Australians to lose money more quickly, at a greater pace, and with potentially greater harm, without the scrutiny and without the respect of even having their lead speaker of the opposition, the person who contributed that 397 words on this bill and the 134 words on the other bill, in this place to answer questions about Labor's deal with the government that has been done behind the scenes and not with the transparency of Parliament. With those few words, Mr President, I anticipate a very robust committee process.
Benares, a second reading. Yes.
I move that this debate now be adjourned.
Is that seconded? I put the question.